Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Discovering Multifamily podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Scandariato with Red Knight Properties. And today we have a special guest here with us, Johnny Wolff, who is the CEO and founder of Homeroom Coliving, which is one of the fastest growing co-living companies in the U.S. He was a financial analyst for a couple companies in Silicon Valley, and he actually ended up relocating to Austin, Texas to pursue real estate investing on a full-time basis. And he's been investing since 2008 and living with roommates since 2002, which obviously spurred him to start Homeroom. And he could talk about his experience after searching for roommates on Craigslist. And we want to learn more about Homeroom and how that can benefit, multifamily property owners. So appreciate you coming on, Johnny.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Anthony.
Sure. So what is this all about? What spurred you to start Homeroom and what's the plan moving forward with Homeroom?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I've been co-living since 2002, essentially. So I had 1 year that I didn't live with roommates when I was living in Austin. I thought it would be fancy to get my own apartment on 6th Street. And honestly, I didn't like it. I really enjoy having that communal experience. And one thing that, we've seen is that the trend of young people living with roommates is just surging. It's in like the 80s, it was like 10% of people were living with roommates that were young adults. And now it's like 30%. So more and more people, I think, people are getting married later. And no one really, living alone is kind of fun for a little bit, but you really, want a family or you want a community. And so that's sort of why the roommate living thing has been surging so much and why there's a lot of companies that are emerging in the co-living space today. For me personally, I was inspired to start the company after looking for roommates on Craigslist when I moved to Kansas City for the 50th time looking for roommates on Craigslist. And I was just I've been doing this for 10 decades, and it's never been a good experience for me, and there's got to be a better way for people to find roommates. So that's when Homeroom was born. I had done roommate housing in Austin, Texas when I was there, and my returns were triple digits by doing roommate housing, house hacking kind of techniques. And I know that you kind of focus more on the multifamily side. I do think that we are seeing transition of how people value square footage in any type of property. And so extra bedrooms I think a bedroom is more valuable than it used to be. And there's opportunities for folks in multifamily to take advantage of that as well.
Sure. No, and we see that too. Most of our properties are in suburban locations, but you do have younger people migrating to the suburbs, especially kind of during COVID, after COVID, sort of situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, how does the business model for Homeroom work for you? So how do you guys operate? How do you monetize your business, and how does it all work?
Yeah, so the way that we do it today is we sort of take a page out of the turnkey provider's book in the single family space. We don't actually do any flips though. We basically help real estate investors, typically out of state, find properties on the MLS, and they have to match some very specific criteria for Homeroom. So we say we need enough parking for roommates, we need enough shared showers for roommates, and also the property has to be in a certain price point, so the cash yield is high enough for the investor. Then we help the investor set up the property with furniture and make some repairs after they purchased it. So it's a perfect space for co-living. And then we add smart home technology and some of our branded products, and then we manage it for them. And our property management is actually free. We make our money by doing a master lease, which we guarantee them rent, and then we take the spread, which is typically about $1,000 per house.
Interesting. So how do you, I guess if you're looking at it from an investment standpoint, and it sounds like you said similar to turnkey, and if it's turnkey, usually it's a fixed return, and there's a specific holding period. How does that process work? Because when there's no really, and I could be wrong, when an appraiser comes in and sees, okay, 4 roommates in this unit, that's why they're getting a premium rent. Is he going to give you credit for it? So how does that look on the back end if you ever want to sell that property?
Yeah, so we're exclusively in single family homes, which I know is a little different than what you guys special in here. And so the appraisal process in single family, I assume you're in a single family home right now.
Yes.
And so the appraisal process, as we know in a single family property, is not based on net rents. It's just based on comps typically in that kind of old comp comparisons sheet that they show you. And so it really makes no difference. The appraisal will go up as the neighborhood goes up, and that's all there is to it.
Right. So it's from that model, it's more of there's more cash flow along the way. And then on the back end, if you get the appreciation, which in probably every single case, if you hold it long enough, you'll get it. And it'll all kind of, even itself out, which is great. So that's how you guys do it. Okay. Is there any specific markets that you guys are finding opportunities for your investors right now?
Yeah, so we are in Kansas City, and that's where we started. That's where we have most of our properties. We recently expanded the Dallas-Fort Worth metro. Because Homeroom adds 40% rent per square foot to these single-family homes, we can actually buy in much better neighborhoods in Kansas City and much better neighborhoods in Dallas. We're looking to expand a couple more markets in 2021. I think we're looking at Phoenix and we're looking at Chicago, but really it's still up in the air, maybe Indianapolis. But yeah, it's really investors, we've never lost an investor in the life of our company. Everyone just renews over and over again because, we're fair with our repairs. We don't charge any property management. It's a really smooth ride for our investors. That's
great. And so why did you choose, you mentioned a little bit why you chose Kansas City, but I want to learn more about the demographics. So if it's, 30%, as opposed to the 80s living with roommates now, what age bracket are you seeing this play out? Because obviously you have student housing, so it's not the same as student housing because it's not semester based, right? So what's the demographic?
Yeah, so our average age is 27. I think, a lot of that's one of the questions we get a lot is like, is this for students? And I think we probably will expand what we're doing and offer it to students at some point in the future. But this is really geared towards 21 and over exclusively, and it's young professionals. The average credit score of our tenants is 730 right now. So it's generally like young engineers, young accountants. We have some travel nurses, some medical doctors live with us. So it's a very high-end clientele. We've actually never had to use up someone's entire deposit when they moved out, which is pretty amazing. So it's because the space is so needed, and there's like 20 million millennial roommates today, and it's like we're competing directly with Craigslist. Like most of them are like pretty delighted by the opportunity to have all the amenities we offer, and generally the same or lower price.
Okay. So what type of cash yields are you looking at when you compare it to, and then there's two questions. Do your investors view this similar or different than a rooming house situation?
When you say rooming house, you mean in terms of like a boarding house, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, rooming house. Usually it's, you have communal floors, common area, common kitchen, and then just room. So that's exactly how
Coliving operates today as well.
Okay. Rooming houses, from what I've seen, again, it all depends on the area, but your demographic you're targeting is a lot different than a lot of the other rooming houses that I've personally seen. Is there any specific return criteria you're looking for when evaluating your model for the investors? Because I know what a rooming house generally would go for on a cap rate basis or
interesting,
et cetera. You guys?
I've never heard the term rooming house before, so maybe I'd love to hear more about that. It sounds like probably just co-living by a different name, more or less. So yeah, we our cash base, we've had some people, we do, one of the coolest things about us in terms of single family space, and in the multifamily space, this is general, is like we do the underwriting, the pro forma with the investor before they buy, and we go through every detail with them. When you're buying a single family turnkey property, you might get something, but it may be a little vague. So we're kind of doing analysis. I mean, obviously I have that background in financial and finance. So that's part of our product is like, we'll actually show you your returns on the cash basis and return on investment before you make an offer on the property. So our cash yields are between 7 and 13. And then a return on investment between 20 to 30 is what we'll say, but we've actually had, recently someone, we ran their numbers and they were in the 80 percentile return on investment. I mean, that's not something we're going to advertise, but it's, some people get lucky. We work really hard in negotiating. They get a massive uptick after they buy and in value, and then the returns are pretty great. So
That's great. And when I mentioned rooming house, so there was a phenomenon. I believe it was mostly I'm on the East Coast, so I'm
I
in
could
New
tell.
York, New Jersey area, and there was a phenomenon in the '70s, and I think it was mostly the '70s when a lot of these single families, these huge, almost Victorian, mansion style 10-bedroom houses got converted, and typically there's a whole state licensing process. There's
Got it.
reporting requirements. You don't have to do any of that with the model you're
Correct.
doing.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking, I mean, like the co-op, kind of the commune, that stuff is definitely on a much higher, bigger scale than we are. We're not going giant Victorian houses. We have 5-bedroom houses generally. We're paying attention to the city laws, all that stuff. So it's just generally kind of a way to maximize revenue without going through a lot of that boarding house, rooming house compliance stuff. And there's just a big need for it, right? So, and that kind of is a nice natural fit for that demand.
Right. And maybe the way that you get around it, if there is any laws regarding, they call it SRO, single room occupancy over here.
Yep.
I'm sure you've seen that. Yeah. Seen
Yeah,
that
we're kind of aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Is by your master, you're actually leasing the property. So it's not third party tenants.
Correct.
And then you guys take a spread as you explain, which makes a lot of sense. I've never seen any other provider like that operate that
Yeah.
way. It's cool.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, there's all this, we avoid HOA neighborhoods like the plague because they are, way more organized than we want to deal with on the neighbor, and also like a lot of them have like only 2 families are allowed in a house, which, is fine, and so we're just kind of cognizant of like where we are, would a house with, 5 young professionals fit in here, or would it stand out? Is there parking? We have like some rules like, hey, you can't park in front of your neighbor's house. It's just not allowed ever. It's like, we have yard care, and we try to be like at least above average neighbors in the community, if not in the top quartile. It's really kind of important to us. And we think that's what allows us to stay, in this without having any issues over, a number of decades.
Excellent. And so how many, I guess, houses have you guys accumulated thus far?
Yeah, so the first couple of years we accumulated 22, which is what we sort of saw as like our beta phase, like in software, where is where you're kind of experimenting, you're trying new things, and trying to figure out what's the right way to do this, right? When we first started, we were actually just renting houses from landlords off Zillow, and they are not going to pay for furniture, but our investors do, right? Because we're helping them with a full investment package that's, they don't have to do much. So that we made that transition about 9 months ago to that. And we actually have 7 homes under contract today. So we're going to be growing our inventory by 25% this in November. And we think that growth is going to continue. We just, the model that we finally figured out is really working well for us.
That's excellent. And what are the average price points on, at least using Kansas City as an example, on the homes?
Yeah, so we have homes that are in the 190s up through the 230s. That's kind of, there's a few different variables that we have to keep track of, like how much are we going to make, and then how much is the investor going to make. And so that 190 to 230 works for us in Kansas City. In Dallas, it's 230 to 270 kind of. So it's just different price points. And that's one of the advantage of us beginning to offer more and more cities, is that there's different return profiles to each city. I think a lot of turnkey providers are saying, hey, Memphis is the best place to invest ever because they're only in Memphis. And it's like, do you have a vested interest in telling me this? I wonder, our goal is to be everywhere. And then if someone says, hey, this is where the kind of return I want is like, I want super high cash yields. It's like, great, we have a perfect spot. Or I want long-term appreciation. We got another spot. So we can be kind of, a trusted advisor helping people navigate their single family real estate purchases versus being like kind of trying to direct them to something, because that's all, we only have one location. So, yeah.
Sure. And have you seen any issues with COVID in terms of people not wanting to live in close quarters like that? With 5 people in a home that don't really know each other too well. Have you seen any hesitations, at least during this year, essentially? Just curious.
Yeah, that's a good. And we get that question a bit. And what we've seen is actually an increased demand, which is sort of counterintuitive. We've seen
Yeah.
there's two kind of dynamics at play. One is that we had 115 roommates, the day when we were kind of all like COVID's here. Two of those roommates had pre-existing conditions and asked to move out. And we obviously let them out of their lease, no problem. Then we saw pretty rapidly 4 people. 2 were like in smaller cities and they were relocated to Kansas City, and 2 were asked to move out of their parents' house because their parents were a little older and they were working in like retail or restaurants. So on a net basis, we actually saw an increase in demand due to COVID. Part of our process for onboarding is that actually every new roommate that comes into the house gets interviewed via video via all the current roommates, and those roommates actually get to decide if that person can join the house. So what the goal there is to really foster people not being strangers for very long. So generally the houses are like small communities. Some people like made their best friends, and some people like are dating people from other houses in our community. So it's really kind of, we do some stuff to promote that, but it kind of naturally, that's why people live in co-living, is to save money and to meet new people and not be alone. It's actually a really nice time to live with roommates, because living alone, like during lockdown, is like, it's like solitary confinement. So
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And so, what is your average? So these houses are around 190 in Kansas City. So what's for one person, one room? What would be the average rent that you guys would charge? And is it on? Are you guys month to month? Is it yearly? 6 months? What's your criteria?
it's 6 months. It's 6 months, and actually each one of our zip codes is different. It's like neighborhood by neighborhood. I would, on the Kansas side of Kansas City, the average price is like $463, I believe, on average. And on the Missouri side, it's like $428. So it's just like they're different economies, and like people have different expectations of price. So we've seen that in Dallas too, because we're all over the metro there. And like some places like 500 is just great for a bedroom. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes people are willing to pay more.
Interesting. Yeah. So tell us about the future. So you mentioned not only in Kansas City and Dallas, but in other markets. How do you plan on expanding your footprint?
Yeah. So we're kind of in the middle of a little fundraising with angel investors right now. So we're going to use the funding to basically grow in Dallas faster. So our goal is to double in the next 6 months, from 22 to about 45 houses. And then, next year we plan on adding two more markets, and then the year after that we plan on adding 3 more. So the goal is to really be in 45 markets nationwide by 2026, and we sort of have like a pretty methodical rollout for markets to do that.
Got it. And are you guys financing any of these properties for the investors, or is it cash? How are you guys?
Most of them are financing. We obviously have some cash buyers. We think leverage is a beautiful thing, especially with rates where they are right now. And your return on investment gets higher with leverage returns. So we generally will say, hey, finance if you can.
For sure. Awesome. How can people find more about your company?
I'm sorry, I lost you there just for a second, Anthony.
Oh, how can people find more about you and learn more about your company, Johnny?
Yeah, so you can go to livehomeroom.com. That's our website. Livehomeroom.com /co-living-investing is where you can find out about our co-living investing platform. Obviously, you can email me, Johnny, at livehomeroom.com. I am always on email constantly, like everybody else is today. So happy to hop on a call and do a little prezzo about how our process works. Takes about 5 minutes. But yeah, I mean, I do think that, I was on a pretty big size meetup in San Francisco they do multifamily. And what I was trying to just talk to, share with people in the multifamily space is that there are ways to increase the value of your property through space arbitrage today. There's a platform called Copa, They basically are doing midterm rentals, 1 month and longer. So if you have, I mean, you can create your own co-living space today and you can make a lot more money. And the management is getting easier and easier. There are platforms that are emerging to do that. So as long as you're navigating effectively, you don't have to worry about like full months vacancy because you always have like at least 3 out of the 4 rooms filled. There's a lot more financial stability in a roommate house, especially a young professional roommate house with elite credit scores. It's more stable than a family. It's more stable than almost anything. So
Interesting. I'd love to learn more about it. So people can find Johnny on his website and platform. And what we'll do is we'll put a link to the website and platform in our social media and also in the iTunes description. So make sure also on iTunes, if you can please give us a rating and review, it would help Johnny and myself's rankings so we can get out our message to more people that are listening to our show. So now that we want to conclude this program, I want to thank Johnny for coming on. Definitely check out his platform. Very interesting, and see if we can help him grow. So
thanks for having me, Anthony. Thanks, guys.
Excellent.